We are back with more on News Talk Saga 960. So very glad you could join us on this Wednesday edition of the Marc Patrone Show. Dan McTeague, president of Canadians for Affordable Energy, is on the line. He, of course, is probably better known for being a member of Parliament for 18 years. 18 years in the Hill as a Liberal, and times have certainly changed in terms of the focus of that party, which has been radically anti-energy. For decades now, well, not decades, but a lot of years now, just openly anti-fossil fuel, anti-energy, anti-carbon, CO2. Imagine a necessary gas, a gas that we need for our very survival now has become public enemy number one for this regime. But things are changing. Attitudes are changing. Even in the province of Quebec, which of course has been vehemently against the idea of pipelines for the longest time. And so Dan's going to bring us up to speed on some recent polling that suggests that the winds of change are blowing in La Belle Province. Welcome, Dan.
Good to be here, Mark. Thank you for that introduction, and you are spot on. The worm has turned. Public opinion is now decidedly moving against the green alarmist activist narrative that has enraptured this country, its politics, its media, over the past, I'd say, 7 to 8 years. And it is really a thing to behold that suddenly people are realizing, oh, there's a cost. Oh, I can't afford this. Oh, look at the price of food. Oh, look at the price of fuel. It's amazing for such an intelligent nation, just how far off the mark we've come. But high prices, avoidable high prices from a nation that has an abundance of natural resources being deliberately stifled tends to bring things into sharp focus for Canadians. And I think for that reason, Mark, we're seeing shifts in attitudes that I'm hoping the Liberal NDP Bloc Green Coalition continue to ignore, because it will make for a substantial and dramatic change in the direction of this country, inevitably.
Well, you've spoken about the economic impetus, the threat of higher interest rates coming now, looming large. They are going up, inflation. We're hearing more and more that there's a quarter of Canadian homeowners now that could very well look at having to sell their home within a few short years, 2-3 years. If interest rates continue to climb, they can't afford it anymore. And so they're looking at things like maybe car payments, interest rates on their credit cards, which are going up, mortgage rates, which once they come up for renewal are going to add another level of burden onto these consumers. And they're starting to panic. And so they're looking around and they're going, oh, the things that we were promised by this government when they got in, that everything was going to be hunky-dory, that we were going to make this effortless, seamless transition to green energy, it has fallen flat, and now people are paying the price. And so all of a sudden, you're right. People are waking up to the fact that maybe a lot of those promises were bogus, and we need to shift gears. And so this is good news for Quebec. This is good news for Western Canada as well. Of course, Alberta, Saskatchewan, where so much of our energy is produced, oil sands. And so who knows what the next 10 years will bring about. Maybe it won't be, shifting away from fossil fuels, but in fact, the rolling out of much needed infrastructure. Imagine for a second, we see this war in Ukraine, where the Russian military machine rolling through, particularly the eastern part of that country, taking more and more territory. And who, I would ask, Dan, should Putin be grateful to for helping to bankroll his war machine? Who other than this government in Canada, which has done everything to stifle the growth of infrastructure. Now, of course, India is, I think, number 2 in terms of energy purchases from Russia. China, certainly right there. That could be us, Dan. That could be Canada supplying those countries in Asia and South Asia. What do you think?
Well, look, Europe spent 30 years saying they're going to go down this road of being anti-fossil fuel and all those green campaigns, and what they call is the end of life resistors. I can't think of the name of the group that's the fanatics that has really permeated the European politics, has now infected Canada as well. Europeans should be to be held accountable for what they have done by turning their back on natural gas and oil. But more importantly, countries like Canada, which followed into that step, thinking that that's the way things should go, and even as recently as Glasgow's conferences on climate, the same baloney we heard over the years that failed, that emboldened, empowered, and enriched Vladimir Putin and made his attack on Ukraine possible, is something that Canada must atone for. And Canada must understand the world is not going to divest itself of fossil fuels. The very people who are lecturing us on how we need to do with less, the ones that say we should have no land and eat no meat, and the WEF and other crazy organizations like that, rather than worshiping on the altar of globalists, what we ought to have done here in Canada is at least said, hey, we're the third largest provable reserves in the world. We have nothing to hang our heads in shame for. We produce our fuel in a way that no one else does, and we are proud of the fact that we've done it as responsibly as we have. And, even Quebec, where there was opposition to pipelines, natural gas and oil, where there was opposition to the development of hydrocarbons, a léger poll last month sampled over 2,000 Quebecers and found, guess what? 46% versus 38 and 39% want pipelines. They also don't like high taxes on fuel because they know what it means. And they certainly don't think that Quebec should deny itself the opportunity of producing energy. I think Quebec voters are far more inclined and certainly a lot more enlightened than their politicians. So I think it's really up to the political leaders in that province, political leaders in Canada, to stop lying. Get with the program, start listening to your constituents.
And now we're seeing this government in Ottawa caving to a degree on things like travel mandates, as absolute chaos has been the result of it. If you look at what's going on, and I know you're well attuned to what's going on at Pearson International, it's absolutely devastating what they are doing to our economy. And so they're finding themselves withdrawing, they're retreating. I'm not saying they're not in collapse, but he's facing all sorts of opposition within his own caucus. Signs that even the NDP may be getting a little skittish about aligning themselves with this guy.
Dummies like Charlie Angus who go and don't give a damn for his constituents. But he lost his friend just last week, Gilles Bisson. You start fooling around with this climate nonsense and start going after oil companies and not going after your own damn policies, which you support, which are driving the Canadian economy on the ground, driving energy prices. People like Charlie Angus ought to be ashamed of themselves. But I say that only because he said this in the House of Commons about me. I'm quite willing to talk about him as long as he continues to lie about me. More importantly, I think if you look at this, anybody who wants to look at the issue of energy, anybody who wants to look at how we've got ourselves into this position, Mark, it seems to me that what we have now is a series of politicians who know full well the wrong that they've committed. And now we have the coward of the cottage once again claiming he's got COVID. God, the guy needs to buy a spine, and Canadians need to buy a brain.
You're not buying it. You don't think he's got any?
No, I think it's bull. I think it's baloney. It's malarkey. I think he does this every time he knows he's
fake COVID.
And look, I know these guys. I know Omar Abracadabra Gabra. I know Mark Holland guy. I brought these guys into the damn party. I gave them their opportunity, their shot. And I know Justin Trudeau. I smell something seriously wrong with what's happened here, and they're running for cover. They know they're in trouble. Now, if only the NDP could buy, a bit of moral spine and give itself a stiff upper lip and tell Justin to take a hike, call a bloody election. I don't care who the leader is. I could run my cat as the prime minister, as the leader of another party and win. So at the end of the day, I think Canadians are pissed off. And I think what Ford got last week or 2 weeks ago wasn't because of Doug Ford. It was because people have now realized, oh my God, we've allowed a narrative, ideologues, green grifters, virtue signalers, cancel culturalists to run our country. And they are running it all right. They're running right into the bloody ground. And Canadians need to smarten up, and they need to speak up, and they need the power of the vote to push back on these grifters, because they can come and attack me anytime they want. I'll throw the gloves off on any bugger who wants to come after me. It's why I don't run for politics anymore, because I don't have to put up with your baloney. But Mark, I think the worm has turned. I think things are changing. And I think what we've been talking about, you and I, for some time is now becoming a reality. And for many people, it's a painful one, but my God, they were warned.
And you believe that he would resort to faking his
Oh yeah,
COVID
yeah.
in order to do what exactly? What would be the point?
Well, he's getting away from the embarrassment of the fact that he's really made a mess of things on the airports. He's made a mess of things on the inflationary front. He's made a mess of things economically. He's dealing with I've had two national media now come after him and say, when do you plan to help Canadians? Provinces are doing what they can to help Canadians because they realize the cost of food and fuel is going through the roof. Never mind the cost of rental. Never mind the cost of mortgages. I think it's pretty clear now that the coward of the cottage is somewhere cowering because he cannot handle true questions. And eventually, even his own bought media will have to turn on him.
Okay, I would suggest that, unfortunately, we've gone so far down the road of these horrendous economic policies. I don't think it's going to be hard to change channel. I mean, Tiff Macklem, of course, a failure as the governor of the Bank of Canada, waited far too long to see the alarm, to see the flashing red warning signs of inflation before he reacted. And so, is it fair to say that we're going to keep going down a recession, possibly, quite probably, higher interest rates, ongoing inflation until that's finally wrestled to the ground? You and I were around in the early 80s. We remember what it was like. We remember double-digit interest rates. We remember people losing their homes. Is there any way to stop that, or sadly, have we gone too far down that road to simply change direction now?
We overinflated the economy. The Liberals overspent on the fiscal side and on the monetary side. We allowed too much time for the mortgage injection program of the central bank to be allowed to drop and buy any mortgage that was out there at face value. The problem we're facing is that with what is likely to be depreciation of the inventory of our housing stock, no amount of stress tests that was given to purchasers takes into account the fact that your home, never mind the ability for you to pay for it if interest rates rise, what if the actual value of the home drops, which it's doing? What happens in that circumstance? Well, are we surprised by the headline that 1 in 4 won't be able to make it? My God. Where were these people, these headlines a year and a half ago when we knew that was going to happen? I've been down this road before, Mark, and I explained to people many times I was an intern, a buck private working in the office of a guy named Paul Cosgrove, housing minister, in 1981-82, when we saw 24% interest rates. I know what got us there, and I know this could very well happen again, because you now have inflation out of control. And by the way, yes, inflation to some extent is housing, but why are we ignoring the elephant in the room? Energy inflation is what's driving this, because it impacts everything. Our desire to permit banks, to permit the Mark Carneys of this world, to allow environmental, social, and governance mandates that your banks and your HSBC being notorious. Anybody who deals with HSBC should shut their account down right now. Those people hate Canadian oil and Canadian products. But I digress. Canadian insurance companies all jumping on this idea that somehow we could wish away oil and gas, and yet the world wants more. We can call ourselves hypocrites, but I think realists know that to have taken the position that we did in this country and allowed green grifters and woke capitalists, I like that word, woke capitalists, to go around and say, well, we can do without this, and we can invest it in EVs and solar panels and windmills. I say that with a very odd voice, because the folks that are driving this are nuts. They don't know at the end of the day what they're doing. And now that they've unleashed this proverbial Pandora's box, they can't shut the damn thing. These are, as Trudeau's father would call them, sorcerer's apprentices. And they have created a circumstance in which inflation is now clearly out of control, and it is very much threatening everyone. How to stop it? Mark, bluntly, if I were Prime Minister of this country, I'd tell every province in this country to get on board, shape up or ship out. We're going to do an east-west pipeline, one going to the East Coast, one going to the West Coast. I would revive Energy East. I would revive Northern Gateway. And I would take people, after the courts have made decisions, I would take the people opposing them and I would lock them up. That's where they belong, in jail. They don't belong in the court of public opinion obstructing, and they shouldn't be hurting our Indigenous people, much less the value of Canadians. I have 1 million barrels going out to the Pacific Coast, 1 million barrels going out to the Atlantic Coast. We have the third largest provable reserves in the world, and I would do the same thing for natural gas. And I would tell those politicians in those provinces like Quebec, start listening to your constituents because they don't agree with your line, your nonsense. You're out of step, and definitely you're out of touch with reality, and of course, politically, you're out of time.
Dan McTeague, joining us from beautiful Oakville, Ontario. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I know you're a very busy guy, so thank you.
Always a pleasure to be here, Mark, because this is where we've said a lot of great things about what we should and should not do, and most people have ignored us, and now I think we have a larger following.
And now, yeah, that's for sure. All right, let's take a quick